On this episode of Blending Bourbon, join Dixon Dedman and myself, David Mark Young, as we discuss some of the supply challenges in the bourbon industry and some of the ways that brands must pivot in order to remain competitive in the market. Join us.
Blending Bourbon is the podcast that takes you beyond the barrel and behind the scenes of the whiskey industry with master blenders Dixon Dedman and David Mark Young.
Welcome back. Another episode of Blending Bourbon. My name is Dixon Dedman from 2XO Whiskey. Joined with me, as always, is the former boy band member turned master blender and owner of his own bourbon brand, David Mark Young of Golden Sheaf. David, you look great today.
It's so good to see your face, Dixon. Thank you, as always, for that warm welcome introduction. I always feel like I have to
come to me.
It naturally, yeah. It's a little bit funny, a little bit cynical, but I know you're being 100% honest, and I appreciate that.
Always.
I always feel like I owe you something after your introductions. Like,
no, we're good. We're
send you some bourbon or something.
No, we know how that works. So we're talking a little bit earlier. You're talking about this next new project you're working on, and talking, and I don't know if you want to speak to that or not. I know you're very, very, very excited about it, and I'm very excited about it. I think it's going to be really cool. Is that what you're drinking right there? Is that?
This is actually port finish bourbon. Okay. I had some leftovers, so yeah, I'm just kind of sipping on that. I do have, so the next thing is maple syrup finish bourbon. Maple syrup, yeah. Which was interesting. These are experiments for, they're small batch experiments, and but the maple syrup one, we just kind of fell into that last week. And it's been a lot of fun. It's get these barrels, you gotta steam them a little bit, and so they'll swell up, and then we just transfer some liquid into them and taste, how they marry initially. But that's what we were talking about. It's not, you're not just mixing maple syrup and bourbon. You're not just mixing port and bourbon. There's a melding. There's a true, and you get it. But it is. I like to have like a baseline. You try that. Okay, you got the bourbon, and then you marry it together in the barrel, and then try it, and then kind of test the progression. But so far, they just kind of follow a line in that flavor profile, category. And as long as it's not over the top, a dessert, it's not a flavored bourbon. That's
yeah.
That's
so, and I'm gonna go somewhere with this, but just bear with me. I mean, because I think what's cool about what you're doing is a lot of, kind of trending a little bit away from, hey, this is what Golden Sheaf is, and I'm just gonna do this, like every, and you're kind of venturing out a little bit into these experimental opportunities, partnering with local people, whether it's port, whether it's what is that stuff, barley wine, whether it's the maple syrup. I mean, as when you get one of these and you lock in on it and you say, oh my gosh, this is a winner, is that something that will like you'll continue that, or or you have, if you find one and the response, your response, the consumer response is, oh my gosh, I can't live without this. Is this something, or is it just like, no, these are one-off things, and when it's when it's gone, it's gone.
Yeah, it's experimental, but we're also navigating our way ahead. So it's I can't help but look at a lot of these things as a startup, as a litmus test. In a lot of ways. So we're going to put out 250 bottles of this port stuff this week and see how it fares, 250 bottles. So if it goes overnight, then yeah, it's something that we'll pursue. But we're setting the stage, really, is where we're at. We spent some time last week, the team, we sat down, did some strategic planning, which is amazing. I love strategy, vision, road mapping. And we started to actually look at our cadence of releases from batch to batch, and came up with a schedule. Every month there's something rolling out, and then that doesn't even include the private custom blends that we're doing. But yeah, so that's where we take kind of this experimental stuff, and if it fares well, if it succeeds that initial test, then we'll decide, okay, what does it look like? We'll scale it out, footprint wise, volume wise, all those things, and that's where we're at now. Is starting to, okay, what's going to stick. But we'll continue to experiment too.
Yeah. And I ask you that question, and I have another question that leads into, but is part of this and what, this kind of experimental, like, let's try this, let's work on it, is that your vision in terms of saying, hey, I want Golden Sheaf to be a kind of evolving, that's what I want this to be? Or is it, are you dealing with some of the things that a lot of other people, I have a lot of kind of former clients, but whatever, that, they're oftentimes having to change their model, change their program, change their, I don't mean to say direction, but having to be a little more creative and pivot more frequently than they had originally anticipated because of what's happening with the supply of liquid in the market. There have been major changes, major acquisitions that have sent massive ripples throughout the market itself. And the market for whiskey is still, I would say, a year to two away from a lot of the speculative barrels, coming of age and entering the market. So, I think I do think there's a bit of a surplus coming when all of these people who have been laying down barrels with just the intention of moving them when they show up. But right now, today, the bulk market, the market for liquid is really challenging. And and then with these acquisitions, a lot of people who had contracts for liquid, ongoing liquid into the future, those are now gone. And I mean, the calls I get are sometimes, people are panicked. And it's the people who are willing to, kind of adjust on the fly or try some different things or whatever. They're seeing great success. And then other people are just like, oh no, this is what I was supposed to have and I'm not going to have it. And what do I do?
Case in point, batch one bourbon was the original Golden Sheaf recipe from the 1800s, and that was like striking gold. Wow. We, found this recipe and now let's recreate it and re-engineer it to meet modern day standards and expectations. I didn't have standards back in the day, and we released it and we won some accolades. It gained a lot of spotlight. It was really good for a weeded bourbon. And then we go to rinse and repeat. Okay, we're going to release what will now be our future staple product. And the pipeline was dry. They didn't have any aged wheat whiskey or weeded bourbon. And so pivot. What do you do? We can't sit and wait and hold out for that. So we absolutely pivoted to now we're doing unique blends from batch to batch. When batch 2 came out, there was this overwhelming following that was expecting more of batch 1, but it was different. Fortunately, the feedback was very positive. Okay, this is not batch 1, it's not weeded, but we had to clarify that. And there were some people that were initially disappointed, but I think all in all, people were pleased with, and that's just it. I think, at least what I can ascertain from, what's going on now and what the future might look like, is you have to have a niche, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the same product. I'm not Jim Beam. I'm not releasing the same thing, same flavor profile, certainly not at those volumes, but the niche is that it's unique and it's good. It has to meet that criteria. It has to be amazing, premium, that's we're at that price point. So, regardless of whether it's weeded, and this is how I became, I referred to myself early on as the bottom feeder, because I only want onesie, twosies, 3-4 barrels here and there, to be able to have a decent supply of varied ingredients for my blends, so that we can continue to produce unique blends from batch to batch. And that is the result of a pivot because of something not being available. But I'm comfortable being exactly where we're at, because now we've got a supply of varied ingredients, or whiskeys that we're going to blend, if that makes sense.
Oh gosh,
did we just
are you back now?
There we go. Was that me? Did it drop?
It dropped for me. I don't know if it dropped for you, but okay, so we're good. But I think, I saw it, and when before Stoli, when it was Mark and I, we were, let's buy 20 of these. Let's buy, and the way somebody would put up 150 barrels of 9-year-old stuff, and everybody was doing it that way. So the person that was holding it would not release our 20 until he had commitments for all the other 130 or whatever. But that's how everybody was doing it. Then you had these big guys that showed up. You had the acquisition of Angel's Envy by Bacardi. You had a couple of these, and all of a sudden, if you didn't jump on the load of 150, you missed out. They weren't breaking it up. They weren't splitting it up. And that only got more complicated as time went on, and people started coming in, and there was a lot of outside money coming in and private equity money. Yeah. And, so this is kind of a weird question, but what I think is a bit advantageous for you and puts you in, being an Omaha, a brand out of Omaha, being you can kind of, you can source from anywhere as long as it's good juice. I've always been a Kentucky guy. I said I was going to be a Kentucky guy. I'm only doing Kentucky stuff. I think, there's a certain advantage right now to doing what you're doing and not, and I don't mean they're like handcuffs or whatever, but if it's good stuff from Texas, you can buy good stuff from Texas. And, if you're a Kentucky producer, a Kentucky guy, I remember having that conversation with Stoli. I was like, yes, you're right. There's a bunch of Tennessee stuff available out there, but for some reason, I don't know if y'all feel it or not, but Kentucky Owl Tennessee straight bourbon whiskey doesn't really ring very true to me,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I try to be transparent, overly transparent, and make it a point to talk about blending and sourcing, and not producing. We're just not there. We're not laying down barrels. We're not in down the road, the vision is to be locally produced, locally sourced, grains, and then produced here in Nebraska, aged here in Nebraska, which is something I'm very excited about. But we've got to build that foundation.
You're not doing that yet. I mean, you've got the money. You're independently wealthy. I don't know why you just do that. I mean,
I need to look through your lens. Yeah, we're getting there. It's so first of all, there's not many distilleries here. So there's not a ton of options.
They build them every day, David. They build them all the time.
They do actually. They build them, and but I'm that's not my business model. That's not my current business model. And we've found this sweet spot where, as long as we're transparent and honest about, I find that consumers really, really appreciate that. That's a lot of times that's what people are calling out. They're talking age statements. They want to do this cost comparison. Is this worth it? Is this worth it? And at the end of the day, it's a no-brainer when it comes to the premium products that we're rolling out. You want to do your homework. We're going to make the information readily available so that you want to rip us apart, or we're just going to give you the information before you don't have to go do a deep dive. And we don't want to appear like we're trying to pull the wool over anyone's eyes. So we will get there. But something I learned about, or I'm learning about business, is to not try to do a lot of things, half-ass a lot of things. We're trying to do this one thing really well. And it's funny blending premium whiskeys.
I think, we had this conversation early on, and it's one of the conversations that I get a lot. And I, we could do a whole podcast on, the time I spent kind of full time in the consulting world, but that was one of the things I talked to a lot of people about and said a number of times. It's like, when 10 years ago, 12 years ago, NDP was a dirty word, like you're an NDP, and now if you it's a whole different ball game. It's whole, that has there are different connotations to that or whatever. But, I get these calls from people and they say, hey, we have this great idea. And their great idea usually involves two things. One is like, okay, so we got this family farm, or somebody's family has a farm, or there's some land somewhere, and we're thinking about buying it and building a big distillery. It's like, okay, what's the second part of this? And they're like, and, if you could help us find some 12-year-old weeded bourbon, we could really launch this thing and get it, into the stratosphere overnight.
Right.
And, my two comments to that are, one, why in the world, unless you had big backers who wanted to build something, would you invest in a facility and have to run a facility, build a distillery and operate a distillery, when there are so many opportunities out there to have somebody make for you exactly what you want made? And you just pick up the sausage. You don't have to investment in making the sausage. And I was like, test get some stuff made, put some stuff down, see where it goes. Then in terms of the 12-year-old weeded stuff, like I have a pile of it right over there with, it's in the corral with all my unicorns. If you follow that rainbow to that pot of gold, it's sitting, the corral of unicorns and the weeded bourbon is sitting right there. And it's, it's easy. Just go take what you want.
Yeah.
And, I sound like a huge asshole saying that or whatever, but the reality is, like, man, I'm seeing it. I just keep seeing it. Everybody's like, oh, and I think for the most part, people they're ambitious and they're entrepreneurial in their mindset, but you could tell that what they're thinking is that if we do it and get it going in 6 or 8 years, one of the big guys is going to come write us a check for $150 million. And it's like, that's great if it happens, but I don't know that your business model should always be let's do, And that's probably a bit off track from what we were talking about in terms of sourcing stuff or whatever. But it's such an interesting place that the industry is in right now, in terms of how do you start a brand, build a brand, develop a brand that people can kind of get behind and feel comfortable with, when a lot of what you're having to buy is kind of, as my wife loves to say, bips and bobs of different things that are out there. And that's a whole different challenge for a lot of people right now, I think.
I've thought a lot about this even more recently, and I guess this has been a journey for me, and I'm just now kind of looking around like, they actually come pretty far from, I remember going, gosh, I'd love to launch a whiskey label, launch a brand, but have no idea how to do that. And, almost became paralyzed with all of the options and not really knowing what direction to go. But so I'm kind of going back to like, how did I get here and why? And I keep thinking back to what I just said a little bit ago. The main thing should, make the main thing the main thing. I think Brendan Bouchard says that in one of his books. But focus on that and do it well, and become an expert in that area, a master. And so when I think about what I'm doing and what I'm passionate about, to me, it boils down to blending. It always has, and I've never really realized that. Like, I have always, as long as I've been drinking whiskey, maybe not as long as I've been drinking whiskey, but I've always tasted a whiskey, and I do this with a lot of other things too, and I will enjoy the good elements of it, but there's inevitably something that I could improve. Like, if that only had, or, and then pull that thread a little bit further, and it's, how do you improve that? And going back to, like you've talked about with Jim Rutledge, 1 and 1 don't equal 2. So to be able to figure that out, and I'm not saying I've got that figured out, but I love that. I love that craftsmanship, and how do we steer this? So that's my niche. That's, I love to go, and I kind of want to get out, and I want to find a bourbon in Delaware and Vermont and Arizona and Seattle, Washington, and be able to take those and say, I found a really good bourbon in New Jersey, but then and it has some really good elements to it, but there's some things, this is how you can improve it. And then I found some other ones, and this is how. So like your deconstructing exercise was really resonated with me, and I'm actually stole the idea, or I'm actually doing this now. I mean, this is probably, it's just not something I was familiar with, but so to sit down and that's what I did. I took 3 bourbons and blended them together and came up with batch 2. And so I went through your exercise, the deconstruction exercise with my product, by myself, and was like, oh my gosh, so I'm tasting this one, and this is why I chose this one, because of these good things. However, there's these not as savory or, unsavory kind of elements that can be improved upon. Well, that's where bourbon number 2 comes in, and then number 3, and then bring them together into number 4. And I love that. I love that. And so I'm excited to be able to pull that thread a little further and go find these. Nobody thinks of bourbon that, comes from, I don't know. Well, the Louisiana thing keeps resurfacing for me, because I felt like I struck gold. Here's this really unique Louisiana bourbon. You know, a lot of times when people talk about sourcing, they instantly go to Indiana. You know, you're sourcing from MGP, which I do have a lot of MGP product, but I've also got some Kentucky product and some Tennessee product and Louisiana product, and working on some Pennsylvania product, and to me, that's the niche. That's the, and as long as we're transparent.
Yeah, I mean, because for me, that's like right now I have 9 different versions of what will be my next release, you know, and
you're getting close.
I'm at the point now where I have 3 of them that I'm absolutely in love with. And, you know, so the big test, and I'll do this about 3 times, is I will get them all at the same proof. I'll mark the bottom of the glasses. I will spin them around, you know, whatever. And then it's just that one, you know, where you just work through all of them and you say out. Wow, this is, you know, but, and I get what you're saying. I mean, the blending part of it, and really the blending part of it, where even in the developmental stages, when you're saying, you look at the parts, and some of the parts have great promise but flaws, and what you're trying to do is find that marriage where it all comes together in this one place that you're super happy with.
Yeah.
And you know, I think for a lot of brands out there right now, and people that are starting brands and stuff like that, you know, they've got 100 barrels of 4-year-old Green River.
Yeah.
And that's what they've got.
Right.
And it's great. It's fine stuff. There's nothing wrong with it. But I think to do something special, you have to have access to more than one component to to build something. And then secondarily, you know, you have to have the ability to find that combination. And, you know, it seems like right now there's a lot of people that want to get into this because they want to be in the bourbon business, but they don't have your passion for, you know, creating something that's special and unique and that is going to resonate with, you know, it's kind of like, yeah, we have a label and we have a story.
Yeah.
May be true, may not be true. But
yeah.
Were you able to, or was someone able to put something together that goes in that bottle that is also going to be as special as that label and that story? And
yeah,
then the other part of that is that because of the way the market is, it's sometimes really hard to find those special elements. And it's cost prohibitive. I mean, I just helped move. I shouldn't say help. I got a call and said, "Hey, this is out there. Do you know some people might be interested?" And I made some calls, but you know, it was 8-year-old stuff, 8-year-old Kentucky straight bourbon, $6,500 a barrel.
Yeah.
$6,500 a barrel. 8-year-old. That's going to have what, a 30 to 35% yield on that barrel?
Right.
Or not, sorry. I'm sorry. But like 30 to 35% loss. So somewhere in the 65% yield.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Which, you know, when you do the math, that makes the liquid that goes into those bottles really daggone expensive.
Right. Yeah. Margins change. Yeah. Yeah. And I know several blenders that, how do I say this? It's they look at the margins versus the quality of the product, you know, and so they want to add more water, you know, stretch it out, lower proof. And that's where, I'm not saying that's wrong, but different my point of view is that it has to meet certain criteria. It would be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking, if you could define criteria for your blends, I don't know if you have captured these, and they're probably pretty simple, at least, they have to be good, they have to be quality, something along those lines. But yeah, I started to think about myself. What criteria do I have? What's good to me? What's quality to me? What do I strive for? Because, I've blended some high proof stuff, and then you kind of do the math. You look at $6,500 a barrel or more, and then you look at your margins and think, gosh, well, if this wasn't 118 proof, if we proofed it down, we could make a couple more bucks here.
I've been there. I won't tell you which one it was, but this is gonna sound. This wasn't exactly. I don't mean to make it sound like it was like this awful or whatever, but it was like I created a concept. This is in my previous life, and this is what they wanted. We want to be at this price point or whatever, and so I was like, fine. I can't go into this. I cannot go into this blending process worried about what the cost is going to be.
What my budget is, yeah.
My criteria demands that it's the best thing that I can create. That's just it. Yep. I'm not putting my name on it. I'm not putting it out there unless I believe in it, and, I came back and I said, this is what it is. And we can do this multiple times. We can grow this project. We can build this. And they're like, well, the liquid cost is just way too expensive. We need if nothing else, we need to put that at an 80 proof. And I was like, well, we're not doing that because that's
right.
not what we made. And they're like, well, and I was like, look, I'm not just gonna throw stuff together so that it gets to a price point where whatever. It's like, we're trying to build something here. We're trying to grow something here. And I can't make chicken salad out of chicken shit. Like, it just doesn't work like that. Like, you want, you want it. This is it. This is how, and this is what it's got to be. Yeah. Or else I'm not interested in being a part of this project. Yeah. It's just, my criteria is pretty straightforward and simple,
It's got to be good. Yeah. It's got to be quality. Yeah. Are you familiar with Parks and Rec? The show, the TV show? There's an episode on there. They're having an art contest, and one of the guys goes to the university in the art program and says, hey, I need some art. And he's like, well, and I'll pay you for it. And he's like, well, what do you need? And he's like, I don't know, $20 worth of art. So he's like, here's the budget. Now let's, throw that art. So that takes away, I can only imagine. And I use that analogy because of your analogy of being a creator and having, all of these colors or, products in your inventory to be able to, at least I think that was your analogy. How, you've got all these options and you start with a blank canvas and you create. But if they were like, well, sorry, Dixon, we're only down to 3 colors. And by the way, you have to use your fingers. So we don't have any more brushes. Then you're probably going to go find another industry or to pull it all back together. I guess that's what really interests me about where you're going with Gold Sheaf. And that's really what I like talking to a lot of the people that have come on here. And I think we need to go further into that because the long and short of it is you can't paint, you can't make art without paint. Right. And paint is becoming harder and harder to come by. Right. And for the most part, a lot of the paint that you can buy out there is all the same color. It's all the same stuff. Yeah. And so it's very interesting to watch what will take place over the next little bit as people either figure out how to take the paint and develop it as you're doing, or whether it's let's just
throw this, this stuff in a bottle with a fancy label and a story and hope that people buy it up. And it's just it's really interesting because I'm having a lot of conversations now with people who are out of paint or whose paint supply is running out, and I think it's going to have long-term ramifications on what happens in this industry over the next, say, 2, 3, 4 years.
Yeah. And to go back to the start of the conversation, we were talking about, okay, you buy X number of barrels, but until that broker has sold all of those barrels, they're not shipping. So I found 4 barrels here, 4 barrels there, 12 barrels, but when I bought them, I started to schedule out my products. Okay, that's going to be part of this blend. That's going to be, and then I get these won't ship until everything is sold, or they even tell me, January at the earliest. And then I go and commit to another 12 barrels that I need right now. And so, it's about pivoting. I mean, there are all of these,
you can be nimble or you can be out of product. It's one or the other.
Yeah. So we can a lot of these experiments, I love, experimenting, trying some of these new things. It's fun. It's a little risky. And I can tell you, I've got one that's not doing really well. It's been in the barrel I won't go in details about it. Hopefully we can pull it out of kind of, I think, this nosedive that it's going in, but it's it's a little disappointing. I mean, 3 out of 4, that's good. Okay. But this other one's not doing what we had expected it to do. And so we're, looking to pivot, but my core is just blending bourbon. I like, that's what I really enjoy. Just a good, straight
you're
bourbon.
Really good at it.
Well, thank you, Dixon Dedman. I
you're really
appreciate
freaking good at it.
Well, having a mentor like you, that's,
gosh. Yeah.
You definitely
Here we go.
have some contribution there.
Look, I don't know if we ended up going where we thought we were going to go with this, but I thought the conversation was very interesting. And this type of conversation, to me, for the 7 or 8 people that are, going to listen to this, this is the type of conversation where I would love to get some feedback. I'd love to get some questions. I'd love for people to say, hey, y'all touched on this. I'd like to know more about this. I'd like to hear more about, I think we, at least what I want to do with this is to be, very interactive with the audience and that type of thing. So, and I think we've proven so far, and we'll continue to prove that we're very much, at least I'm an open book. I'll probably say things that get me in trouble, but I mean, if this is something that kind of, I don't know, anybody's thinking, hey, I want to get into this. What are the things I should consider, or please touch more on this. I would hope that we could start to incorporate more of that feedback into these episodes.
Yeah, that's a great point, because we
should do like a episode where we just answer listener questions.
Yep. We have, we've been doing this a couple of weeks. We really haven't been doing this a long time. We have a few episodes out there, and we've banked some episodes. So we've got some really great episodes, I think, with some really great guests coming out. And so we're starting to get engagement, feedback, all those things. So that's the direction that we're going. And in hindsight, I've answered questions on the spot, that people kind of bring forward. But I agree. I think we take those and, break on an episode. So if you have specific questions, comments or things.
And I will make sure to have 2 or 3 drinks before that episode, so that I
guaranteed to get the truth.
Takes my filter off a little bit. Yeah. Well, this is fun, man. This is a lot of fun.
Always a pleasure. Yeah.
I look forward to the maple syrup.
Same here. Yeah, I'll get you a sample. I think you got a couple samples of some other stuff. Finally got some products shipped out
Finally
there.
got some.
Yeah. But yeah, this is great.
And I would tell, our listeners, if you're not watching this on YouTube, you are doing yourself a disservice. I cannot begin to describe how attractive you are. I mean, how good you're. Just a beautiful man, and you've got a great voice. But my goodness, that voice and that, what do they call it, visage? I mean, that is a deadly combination. So, if you're listening and not watching on YouTube, you are. I mean, you're only getting half of what you could get from David Mark Young. I can tell you that much.
I'm hearing a lot of smoke blowing, but it takes one to know one.
Not
Dixon
me.
Dedman, you're a beautiful man. What can I say?
Never do that. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that.
All right. Well, do the thing where you talk about subscribing and all that stuff.
Yeah. Subscribe, like, comment, share. We want your feedback. We want your comments. We want to engage. So send us those challenging questions. What do you want to know? I know that episode that we put out a couple weeks ago, why did Dixon Dedman leave Kentucky Owl? It stirred the pot a little bit, and we started to get some people, that were, we had a couple of comments there. Folks were like, if you've not seen this, you need to see it, or you need to listen to it. I mean, it's a little controversial. It's a little, it's not, it's speculative, right? But here's Dixon Dedman himself talking about why he left Kentucky Owl. So that's inquiring minds want to know. So send us all of those questions if you're curious about anything in particular. Let's dissect, peel back the layers of Dixon Dedman. Yeah, we'll get deep. We'll have some drinks. Absolutely. That's what we want, right? We want
perfect, man.
Good content.
Absolutely.
So
that's exactly what we're looking for. That's exactly what we're looking for. So,
well, that's a wrap, sir. Thank you. Oh,
it's time to go.
I'll drink for you then. Cheers, sir. Cheers, everybody. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, comment, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.